We first started using AI probably March of 2023, just like every other realtor did out there. But the more I started using it, the more I realized it's not a replacement tool. It is still a very much a human in the loop, but it can make life so much simpler. And
Hey, welcome everybody. Got a great show for you today. First interview we've done in a while with a land guy down in Texas. But before we get into that, how's it going, Mason?
Things are good. It's November as we are recording this episode, and you and I are both trying to just ramp things up, trying to get as much under contract as we can before the end of the year. A lot of people take time off, and we don't. But unfortunately, a lot of landowners want to take time off too. So we're doing everything we can. But yeah, how are things on your front?
Yeah, man, we're doing the same. I think this is a buying opportunity that we haven't seen in a long time, and I don't know how long it'll be here. So we are aggressively working on acquisitions. But tell us about our guest today.
Yeah, today we had the privilege of interviewing Jason Northcutt, who is a land-focused realtor in North Texas. Jason started his career as a mortgage loan officer in 2003 and developed an in-depth understanding of real estate financing, helping clients navigate complex transactions with confidence. 2016, he transitioned to a full-time realtor specializing in farm and ranch, vacant land, development properties across Texas, from DFW to San Antonio to Houston beyond. Jason is the founder and team leader of North Realty Group and North 40 Land and Ranch, and has built a highly recognized team with a service-first approach, leveraging cutting-edge marketing, data-driven insights, and AI-enhanced strategy to deliver unmatched results. So we really hope you enjoy this show. We enjoyed interviewing Jason, but without further ado, let's bring him in. Mr. Jason Northcutt, it's great to have you on the show. How are you doing?
good, Nathan. And how are you today? I appreciate you bringing me on.
Yeah, no, excited to have you on here. I've been engaging in your content for quite a while now, and I think it'll be a really great conversation. But before we dive into the regular interview, Jason, could you spend a minute or two telling the audience about where you're from and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. So I am a true and tried Texan. So born, raised here, first 18 years of life, and then went in the military and traveled the world. So came back to Texas in 2015, take care of our mother. She was ill before she passed. And then we've been here since, and probably be here for a couple more years, and then we're moving back up to Pacific Northwest area. So my wife's from Montana. But I spent from 03 till 10 in the mortgage business. Went back on active duty for a couple of years, came back to the mortgage business all the way up until 2016, and when I became a realtor. And then in 17, really started diving deeper into the land side of it. And it was actually all by chance, to be honest with you. And it was a Facebook post while I was grilling chicken, drinking a beer, and scrolling Facebook, and the investor is like, hey, this is what we have. This is what we're looking for. We'd love to talk. I want to say, if I remember correctly, the next day I figured out who they were, where they were, found their phone numbers, found their emails. I was the only one that called them. That night we had dinner and signed 13 listings the next day. So, and it was all land, all subdivisions. So, and when I say subdivisions, we're not talking your typical residential, these are 10, 15, 20 acre subdivisions. So, and that's kind of how we got to here. So, and we built a business around working mainly with investors, mainly with land. So we understand the whole concept of from initial finding the piece of land, finding the dirt, doing all the due diligence to, closing them out, getting the last lot sold and being done. So, and we've rinsed, recycled, and repeated since 17. So was it 7 years now, 8 years, something like that. So yeah, that's us in a nutshell.
That's awesome.
And there's a lot of other things going on too, as you can see on my post. I'm always trying to figure something out to be better. But yeah, that's the gist of it. So.
Oh, yeah. No, and then that's why we're excited to have you on the show. Dan and I are both land investors, and I'm a land broker as well. And
Gotcha.
one of the, common there's actually a lot of misconceptions about land, but we see so often that a lot of the people that call themselves real estate investors, house wholesalers, residential real estate investors, or residential brokers try to make that switch into land. What are some of the common misconceptions that you see about these people as they move into this different asset class?
The honest to the point is they think it's easy. That is the biggest mistake I see is they think, oh, it's dirt. It's not a house. It's easy to do. And I'm like, you have no idea. Yeah, maybe a residential lot in the middle of Dallas. That's a 65 by 150-foot lot. Yeah, you can do those all day long and twice on Sunday. But you start getting into development pieces of it or understanding the flipping side of it. It takes down a whole different avenue. As I like to say, dirt. And it's not just dirt. I mean, there's a lot that goes to it, but I think that'd probably be the biggest mistake that I see.
Oh yeah. Well, within due diligence, let's try and like pick apart a like specific one that you see people just fail at consistently. And everything is so market specific where you see the investor that went to Lehigh Acres, Florida, and they have all the, 10 questions they ask and everything. And then maybe they try to go into North Texas. What's something specifically you see that like will make or break a land investor in your market?
I think a lot of the questions are going to be similar across the U.S., right? There's no real huge difference per se, except for location, right? Every state's different. All the requirements different. I would say my top one that I see is they come in thinking that they can take a 1-acre tract of land and split it very easily into two. And I'm like, no, it's a whole process of going through county commissioner's court, getting engineering studies done, rain runoff. I mean, they could tell. We've actually had one where the county commissioner clerk says, I drove out there and the culverts were a little dirty. We want those cleaned before we'll approve your plat. Like, seriously. So I would say that's the biggest thing I see during due diligence is they don't actually, I guess, research what they're trying to do before they close. Outside of that, I'd probably say water and electric are the two other biggest. And my last one is my best one. So Texas, I'm sure every other state has these too. I call them defunct subdivisions. Someone went in, divided up the land, and it never got built. No roads, no infrastructure. And we'll have an investor call, hey man, I got this great deal. I could buy 6 lots for $5,000. And I'm like, cool, where's that? And they give me the information and I break it down for them. I'm like, yeah, you need to run with there's a reason they haven't sold and there's a reason why you're getting them for $5,000. We've had a few not listen. They bought them and they never sold them. And I'm like, I'd probably say those are some of the biggest mistakes I see.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up not understanding the local regulations because this varies so much from place to place. I mean, yeah, there's subdivides I'm working on in the Carolinas where all I have to do is get a survey done and record it, and there's no government intervention of any kind. And if I take that as my rule and try and come to North Texas, I'm gonna be in for a rude awakening.
Yeah, and even here it varies county by county. I mean, the state rule is 10 acres or larger. You don't have to deal with anything within Governor County. But we have some counties that'll go down to 5 acres with no issues. And then while you're getting it platted, change their mind, go, well, we're doing 10 acres now. And you're like, what? Like, we've actually had that happen, that the county decided they changed their mind. They went back to 10 acres. But yeah, to your point, Dan, it's crazy to think what you can do in South Carolina, North Carolina, you can do in Texas, because it is just, yeah. It goes back to what I always tell people, land is not just dirt. There's so much more to it.
No, that's very true. And I also liked your point about people think it's easy. And sometimes maybe it's simplistic, but it's certainly not easy. And what Mason and I have seen, the last 5, 6, 7 years is there was a whole crop of people that came into land and when the market was hot, right? When everything sold overnight. And then, well, here we are, end of 25, almost into 26, and a lot of people have fallen off. And that's happened with realtors, apartment investors, house wholesalers, right? It's not real estate isn't as liquid as stocks anymore. And obviously I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it was pretty crazy there for a while, and that time is over. And so what are you seeing is the biggest differentiator with the investors you work with that have survived into today's market and those that have fallen off from the last few years?
To your point, I think it's a lot of them came as a flash in the pan, right? They thought, oh, it's quick money because I saw all these land investors and took all these land courses and they can buy it quickly and flip it quickly. I think the ones that we've worked with have been doing this a while. They understand that the markets do cycle. They understand that it may be a 6-month to 18-month play. It is not an overnight game. And when we work with all of our investors, we lay it out. We're just very honest with them. We're like, here's the good, here's the bad, here's the ugly, here's where we should be. But you're still looking at 9 to 12 months before it sells. And and I always tell them, you have to be comfortable with that. And if not, it's not the right deal for you. And I think that'd probably be the biggest the defining difference between the two is they understand that land is a slow play in most cases, especially if you're dividing. If you're subdividing land, it's 18. I mean, it could be 18 to 24 months till you're closed out in some cases. And then there are cases like, to your point, Dan, is during the hot market. I mean, we had a 40 acre parcel subdivided into 5 acre tracts. We sold those out in like 180 days.
Yeah.
But that was a different market.
Firstly, a different market. Yeah. I just out of curiosity, most of your investors you're working with, are they selling all for cash? Are they selling all on terms, a mix of both? What is their
So we have some that have, the majority of everybody we've ever worked with, they're cash, right? They want cash or finance. They want out of the game. They don't want to hold a note. But we are seeing some shift in that, where we are having some investors that have said, you know what? I'm okay with a couple of notes. I'll hold a couple of terms and, but more than a couple than that, I'm not comfortable. But then I have some that actually, that's all we promote is it's seller finance, cash, or, traditional financing. And, they're okay with holding the note because they're making 12% interest and they have 10 to 20% down. The thing about land, and I know it sounds, some people may listen to this kind of mean it in the Jason. I'm like, unless they built a house on it, you can foreclose on it in a day, basically. I mean, obviously it takes more than a day, but the process is a lot faster, and you can turn right back around and relist the property to 20% more, do another 20% down, 12% interest, and rinse and repeat. Obviously, we don't want people to foreclose, but land and seller finance, I mean, that is, if someone comes on hard times, the last thing they're going to do is pay their land note versus their mortgage on their house, right? I mean, that's just life. So, but yeah, we're seeing we're starting to see more of a mixture now. I didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole. So,
no, we like these rabbit holes because these are the conversations Dan and I have every day of, my new company that brought me on, to manage acquisitions. They'll do these ranch liquidation events and sell out 30 or 40 properties in a day by creating a huge sense of urgency and, no seller financing really, which is kind of really fascinating to see how that process works and everything. But with that, I want to switch gears just for a little bit and talk about the broker side of things, where I'm looking at your website. I'm scrolling. You have a ton of listings. Which is awesome. And a lot of them, it looks like these were, kind of the exempt subdivisions is what we call them, of the survey and sell. How do you maintain a balance of, having a tremendous amount of volume and, I mean, these are good looking listings and, being able to like maintain a higher level of quality? Is it because your client, side on the seller side is small, or will you take any land listing?
So it's a mixture of both, to be frank with you. I'll be frank with you, last probably 45 days, my follow-up with my listings, my sellers are still well taken care of, but the more in-depth that we've been doing, I've kind of like, oh crap, I got to get back to it, right? And we've created a lot of back-end but the main reason we can do what we do is because we have the process down. Like we have droners, we have people that can go out and do photos for us in a 2-hour, for example, a 2-hour radius of Waco. That's a lot of ground in Texas. We have people there. We have people in Houston. Of course, I'm a drone operator, so we have stuff up here. But, the biggest thing for us is, at one point we would take just about anything, but now we kind of scaled back to like, okay, is it a project worthy, right? Or is it someone that's new that we want to build that relationship with, right? And that's the key side of it. Now, if a friend calls me and says, hey, a good friend of mine has to sell their lot. Someone passed away. It's a $10,000 lot. Like, hey, send it to us. We'll get it squared away. We'll take care of everything and get them taken care of. But we're a little bit more selective. My goal for this year, which I still have about 45 days to try to accomplish it, is I really want to take a listing at least 1,000 acres. So I've got 45 more days to kind of push it, but yeah, we're getting a little bit more selective because we want to make certain that the project's going to sell. So, but within the market right now in Texas, it's kind of weird, right? We were talking We put a blog out the other day, about 2.8% of homes have been selling, but land is a little bit different. It doesn't follow the same cycle. So right now we are in a slower cycle, but people are still out looking for land, and they are making the decisions of, hey, I can go buy an acre and a half for $65,000 and spend $200,000 on a house that I love and be all in for $350 versus going to some city and buying a 3,000 square foot home on a 65-foot lot. So it's interesting. It's a balance. So,
oh yeah. And, talking to one of my brokers, it feels like we're moving into like a more normal market, but the market still feels weird. So kind of along the selective question, looking at your listings, I'm from Texas as well. I'm actually a Baylor grad, so I know the Waco, area and everything.
Oh yeah. Oh, you know what I meant by 2 hour radius of Waco is a large tract of land.
and it depends on how much traffic there is on 35 or, on the highway too. So it's,
the nice thing is Waco, 35 through Waco is completed. So it's not too bad until you get down towards Temple. And then it goes from a wide to back to 2 lanes, and it starts to bottleneck. And then as soon as you're outside of Temple, it clears back up until you get to North Austin. So,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
But,
I'm always on that.
No, I mean, and hearing that 35 is done, I don't believe you.
For now. But I mean, I'm 50 years old, and I can't remember a day that 35 wasn't under construction.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, and what people don't understand is like San Antonio to Austin takes 2 hours, with 59 miles taking 1 hour and then 1 mile taking the next hour. But, I'm seeing, properties in Livingston, Texas, which is outside of Houston, up to Waco area and the, North Texas and everything. How do you keep a pulse on all these different markets as a broker? Because they are so drastically different.
Yeah. Honestly, it's a lot of research. I mean, because of, the way I look at it is, one is, people go, well, you're not from there, so how can you sell there, right? Well, the internet's a great thing. It was, founded years ago, right? 25, 30 years ago. But the thing is because we've been selling in those areas for so long, we know them pretty well. And we also do boots on ground. We go to the properties. We may drive a 3 or 4 hour drive could go drive a, 30, 40 acre tract, because we want to know. I always joke, I say, I want to know what it looks like, tastes like, and smells like, right? And that's the biggest reason. But we also do a lot of research. We also look at the data. We are in several MLSs, so we're not just pigeonholed into, the North Texas MLS, but we don't pigeonhole ourselves into things like PropStream. PropStream's not a bad thing, but it's a third party aggregate site that's really not pulling a lot of data sometimes. So we're looking at not only MLS data, but we're also pulling geographical data. We're pulling data from Texas A&M research for their land division. We're pulling stuff from Lands of America, lands.com. I still call it Lands of Texas, but lands.com I think is what they mainly go by now. But so we do a lot of research, basically. So, and if we don't know something, we call the county. We built those relationships with the county appraisal districts. I've had enough transactions that I can call a county commissioner's court and they understand. I tell them, like, I'm a realtor, I specialize in land. We start to talk, and then they start to realize, okay, he actually does land. And so when we have questions, we can, we've built those relationships in that respect side of it to where it's a lot easier for us. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Everybody thinks land is easy. No, I mean, at Livingston, for prime example, Mason. So mainly, it's not really, well, it's kind of northeast Texas. It's piney woods. It's completely different from Dale, Texas, which is outside or west of Austin. More arid, more red clay soil, more mesquite, and completely different from trees to West Texas oil. I mean, that's Texas, and they're only a few hours apart from each other, and so. Yeah, it takes a pretty big bandwidth sometimes to keep track of it all.
Oh yeah, and I mean, just to comment really quickly, why it's so important that you have a realtor that knows what they're talking about. Of Livingston, Texas, we grew up. We had 70 acres on the lake in Trinity, Texas, which is on the other side of the lake. And
other side,
very different than Livingston. Trinity, at least whenever I was a kid, it was
they've kind of like,
It's a little deliverancy, a little, as versus Livingston, which is actually pretty nice. And yeah, I have, great friends that, their family had been in the timber industry for centuries. Beautiful, beautiful homes out there.
But also, speaking like timber, for example, is I can look at an aerial photo and almost with certainty tell you if it was timber exempt. And they're like, how can you tell that? It's like, because trees don't grow in a straight line. These are all in a straight line. You see these clearings, you have all these trees in a straight line, and you have a huge path that doesn't have trees. I said at some point or currently, they have a timber property. It's a timber exempt property, and they're harvesting timber right now. And they're like, how can you tell that? I'm like, well, first of all, I've looked at a lot of photos. But it's also knowing the areas, right? It's also knowing how each geographical area, no matter what state you're in, is knowing which, areas do what. West Plains, Texas, it's a whole different ballgame from East Texas. And East Texas is completely different from the North Plains, the Amarillo area. The nights are different from the days. I mean, it just comes down to a lot of just, they always joke about niching down. I mean, people call me for a reason. It's because I researched the crap out of it. So,
yeah. Well, Jason, I really want to talk about timber properties, but before we get into that, I kind of bookmarked, you referenced the article, I think it's called "The Texas Land Market Isn't Frozen, It's Strategic." And you talked about how few houses are trading, but there's still demand for land. So can we expand on that? What are you advising your clients? If I were coming to you, I had the money to spend on a land investment, where would you say to avoid and or focus within the markets you do business in?
I hate to say it, but with today's market, the first thing I'm going to ask you is what's your budget and what is your end goal as an investor? So if you're saying, hey, I have a $2, $3, $4 million budget and my goal is to take this land, either hold it for a year to two in a growth market and then recapture it there, or you say, hey, I want to buy 100 acres. I have the funding. I want to do paper lots and then resell to a builder. I'd say, okay, here's the areas that you want to look at, right? Versus you say something like, hey, I want to do 10-acre tracts. I'm like, okay, well, you need to stay away from Dallas. So, because there's a whole different ballgame between markets. But then it also comes down to, the next question I always ask is what's your comfortability, right? What is your, at the end of the day, I always tell them, what's your pocketbook look like? Meaning, are you okay with your hard costs? Are you okay with your overhead and carrying costs? And if they feel comfortable with that, then I start making recommendations on, okay, here's some great areas to look at, but they are slower. You can get them at a great price, not 10 cents on the dollar, but you can get them pretty low. And then turn around, still have a, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 profit. But here's where it's going to take you a bit longer. It's going to take you an extra 4 to 5 months to get it sold versus if you were in, say, for our Dallas Fort Worth market, like say Greenville, which is an hour drive to Dallas, right? Versus if you're 4 hours out, that's a whole different market. Hopefully that makes sense. I think that makes sense.
What I was really getting towards is, we talked about the market has slowed down, but since I started in real estate in 2018, it had been a nonstop seller's market. And it was everyone always romanticizing about the great days of 2011 and 12, 13, how cheap and easy it was to buy good deals. And I feel like we are in many places at a place where there is an opportunity to buy at prices we haven't been able to for a long time. I'm seeing that everywhere I'm doing business, both with the response we're getting with our direct to seller marketing and with what we're seeing on the market. And so what I'm really trying to get to is, are you seeing more of a buying opportunity in Texas?
Yes.
Elsewhere?
Yeah. And it also comes to, I go back to what I said earlier. It all comes down to what your end goal is, right? If you're looking for a quick flip, we're going to recommend a certain area. If you're looking for something you're okay with a longer term hold, we may say, a great example would be Burnett area, right? So northwest of the Austin corridor, huge opportunity there if you're patient, right? Because that growth is pushing out to there. But as a buyer and on the investor side, there's definitely still a lot of opportunity there, but you have to be smart about it. You can't just go, oh, it's a great deal because it's worth $300,000. I can buy it for $200,000. I'm like, okay, sure, but it may take you a year to sell it. or 2 years? And are you okay with that cost? So, we do approach it. We do approach our buyers on the investor side with caution. Like, hey, before you make that final decision, let's break down all the data that we have and then make a decision based off of that, not emotion or price tag. So,
Yeah. You brought up Austin, and Austin's kind of the poster child for the pullback, for price decreases and oversupply, and at least in multifamily and single family. I don't know as much for land, but I've got to think there's a decent correlation there. Is there anywhere that's so slow or still declining to the point where you would generally tell people just to stay away unless they have a very long time horizon?
Austin. No. No. So I see that a lot. So here's my thing. When you look at the news, it's always about residential. They never really talk about land or infrastructure, right?
Yep.
I think we're Austin, and hopefully I'll get to the answer to your question, but this will help. Austin, is like the tech corridor, right, for Texas. Like all these technology companies want to come to Austin, right? But now they're like, well, not really. Because Austin's kind of got, they say keep Austin weird. No, they did. So they're moving on the outskirts, like Pflugerville. You're looking at my mind just went blank on some of the other cities I deal with down like Bastrop, all those areas. It's hard to say there's any one particular area to stay away from. There are pockets like I'll use as an example Lago Vista, which is it's like northeast of Austin on the lake, Colorado River. Has always been a very unique city with a lot of empty lots. Well, a few years ago, I set the comps for all of Lago Vista. I sold like 30 of them in a year. And then now, if you said, hey, Jason, I want to go buy this lot in Lago Vista, I'm like, no. You're looking at an 18-month to 2-year sell for a $50,000 lot, right? Like we're going to say no. Now, I mentioned Burnett area is a good opportunity, but also on the same side, I'm seeing projects being built that aren't moving. So I'd probably say let's be a little cautious. It's going to be area to area, to be honest with you. I would say most of our investors, I tell, look, your bread and butter is going to be within an hour drive of a major community, major center, right? That's where you're going to have a little bit quicker success. If you're willing to go from an hour to an hour and a half, it's going to be a different demographic, but you still have some play there. But then you go to these small cities and you're like, nothing's selling,
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. And then the other side of it is when we do our data analysis, we're not just looking at what the value is. We're looking at, okay, probably think of a good one. As an example, recently, like Teague, for example. Teague is south of Fairfield, north of Houston. You're really maybe an hour and a half to Dallas and about an hour and a half, hour and 40 just north of Houston, right? You look at Teague and like you can get a great deal, but nothing has sold in 12 months. You have 15 active land deals and nothing has sold. I'm going to be like, proceed with caution, right? Because I can't tell you what the market truly is, how the market's truly responding because nothing has sold, not on market anyways. And so then we'll call some of our land lenders and stuff, say, hey, can you pull any off market data that you may have that we're not seeing? But yeah, I know it's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question of there's going to be specific areas like we're going to tell you no. Then we're going to go, hey, let's look at the data and we can make a better decision.
Yeah. And something interesting you said there that is a trend I'm seeing everywhere that I both live and do business is you said when you alluded to them keeping Austin weird, you said, a lot of people are going to the outskirts, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. And, Colorado Springs where Mason's at, and I used to be, here in San Diego where I live, in a lot of the markets I'm doing business in the Southeast, it's the same thing where people are avoiding the downtowns and they want that 5 to 20 acre tract, 45 minutes to an hour outside of town. And that is still selling like hotcakes for me.
Yes.
So it sounds like you're seeing the same thing in a lot of Texas markets.
Yeah. And so for you're talking more like going east past El Cajon. So, for you guys that have any type of land, you're driving a good ways. I was stationed on 32nd Street in San Diego.
I guess I'm more mean for housing.
Yeah.
Everyone,
Well, I think, COVID had a lot to do with it. People realized that they could technically and truly work from home, maybe a remote commute 2 days a week, and the rest of the time they can work out of the house, right? Or a remote office. And so you're seeing a lot of unless they're like a historic districts, everybody is moving out. They're like, I'd rather just not be stuck in downtown. But then we saw where people were like, they were stuck in downtown. They realized, wait a second, you mean I can live an hour from my job, have fiber, be able to work every single day. I can get a piece of land and build a house for 20% less than what it would cost me to build a house in the city. And people are realizing or have realized that, and they're like, holy crap, like that actually makes sense. And to your point, that's why people I think are moving out, is because they realize they don't have to be stuck into a traditional subdivision, right? Traditional neighborhood master planned, unless that's truly what they want. But and they're getting to the point to where they can have food delivered. Amazon can be delivered within 2 days. The only thing you got to worry about is your milk, because if you live an hour from a grocery store, you forget your milk, you're like, well, I guess I'm not eating cereal tomorrow. So I mean, but think about it. When we were younger and you had grandparents that lived in the country, that's just how it was.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah.
I think, did that answer your question? I know I kind of went down a rabbit hole there.
No, you did. Thank you. Yeah.
So, one of the things I like about being in the land business is, regardless of all of, what the job market is doing because of AI and all this kind of stuff. My wife's a former software engineer now. She stays at home and works in the company and stuff. But, it seems scary. But AI is a tool that we're all using to a certain degree in our land businesses. Dan and I are pretty simple. Both of us still pull most of our data from PropStream and send direct mail, and we still get deals all the time. Without all the, fancy software out there. But you, Jason, one of the reasons I follow a lot of what you're doing is because you're doing so much on the AI front. I think I just saw the Texas Real Estate Commission approved, a CE course for you related to AI. Can you talk, I guess, at a high level, and then we'll dive in deep on how you're utilizing AI in your business and recommending it for your investors as well?
Yeah, I make funny videos with bananas and, dancing monkeys. And I actually have a couple of them of a Yeti riding a horse going, call North 40, the fun stuff. Now, I think, so, we first started using AI probably March of 2023, just like every other realtor did out there, just playing around with it, asking questions and just, and then I kept using it, but then I kind of was like, oh, okay, cool. I may log in and look at it 3 or 4 days. But the more I started using it, the more I realized it's not a replacement tool. It is still very much a human in the loop, but it can make life so much simpler. And even going from 2023 till now, even the last 6 to 8 months, the huge leap forward, it really opens your eyes to what you can use it for land analysis, for data analysis, for research analysis, for, gosh, I don't even know where to start. I mean, it if it's used properly, I think it's an indispensable tool, especially as a land investor, right? Because you can build out a tool within AI that will help you evaluate a piece of land better than you can just looking at PropStream and some local data and penciling it out. Because I pencil everything out, right? Literally. It used to be the day you pull your comparables, you sit down, you look at it, and you're like, okay, look at this, make all these adjustments. Well, I can now do that in AI and do that in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's dive into like an example of, say you've got a client that's got, $1 to $2 million. They want to do one of these exempt subdivisions, and you're thinking, hey, here's, trends that I'm seeing. What do you plug in on the input side into AI to say, hey, analyze, give me 3 markets, or look at these few properties, which one's going to, work the best for this, or however you go about it?
Yeah, there's two different ways we look at it. I built one custom GPT in AI that has the.
Are you using ChatGPT, or what are you using for?
Oh yeah, so I guess I could. Yeah, so we use Perplexity for a lot of our deep research, and then we use ChatGPT for data analysis, and we use Claude for writing. Those are our top 3. Then the fun part for me is I get to play around with Perplexity and ChatGPT now have their own web browser. And so, for example, I can go into a county website, open up the county website, click on this little thing that says assistant. Now that's open and say, hey, I need you to research this website, find me the most current PDF for subdivision rules for out of county with no roads being added, right? And it'll, while it's sitting on the search, it's over here and it searches it, right? And then I can go, okay, now cross-reference it into which document is it, what page, what paragraph. So that's more of the higher level. Mason, you got a question? You bring a light bulb went.
I do. So like one of my biggest frustrations is no matter which buddy of mine created a software to, get the best land data out there, or PropStream or DataTree or whatever. County assessor is going to have the most accurate and up-to-date data typically.
Yep.
So are you able to, have your, whenever you're using one of these browsers, or have one of your agents go in and like effectively actually do a data pull on the county assessor's website to analyze what's going on? Because here's a good example. So both of our companies will sell a tremendous amount of land off market. So if you're like looking on the MLS or looking on third-party MLS sites like Zillow, Redfin, whatever, you're not going to see all this data to create 20, 30, 40 comps that are going to show an appraiser or show whoever,
Right.
Here's a good market. This is what, the price per acre of land is selling for. So you have to go in, look at neighborhood sales within, the county assessor's website. But that's a big pain in the ass because you're clicking on all these things, and sometimes it's in an Excel spread or a CSV, and sometimes it's in a PDF. Like how in depth are these browsers and agents able to get within county data?
They're getting better. They're not. That's where I go back to human in the loop. So there's still things that they can't get into because it's a whole what we call clickability issue, right? It's trying to figure out how to click the right link to open it. But if it at least reference it, here's the fun part: if it can at least reference it, then I can physically go in, human in the loop, take that data, extract it, and basically, they'll term parsing data, right? So then I could take that and upload that into like a chat GPT and say, okay, now I need and off the top of my head, I'd probably say something like, hey, I need you to analyze all these data, break it into 5 and 10 acre tracts. I need you from a 10.01 acre to 20 acre tracts. What has sold and what trends are you seeing, right? And so that way it starts analyzing. Here's the breakdown of these acres. Here's the breakdown of this. Here's the trend that we're seeing. A prime example would be going back to the one we had created using appraisal data, right? We take the 2024 USPAP, which is the appraisal guidelines that appraisers have to use as a licensed appraiser. We put that in ChatGPT and we push our data against that. So based on that, where would our comparables be at? But then this is where I get to be the nerd, because I'm a part nerd, part land guy, right? I'm like, okay, well, can we find any trends? Is there anything, we can look at that shows us, okay, so I'll use a subdivision as an example, like my subdivision where I live. I take a year's worth of data and I say, okay, well, what houses went on the market, came off the market, went back on the market? What was the difference between price started at and price sold? We start trying to find those trends, right? So what percentage did they actually finally sell at? And so it just comes down to, having the brain to work it to as an I think that's probably why I work with investors so well, is because that's what investors are thinking. Like, how are the trends, right? What is our percentages? What is our margins? But they are getting better at being able to source that data. And like I said, as long as they can reference the data and it can't necessarily get into the data, we'll pull it out. Something that we are working with is not Notebook. Notebook LM. Sorry. I was thinking Notion for a second. So Notebook LM, you can take large amounts of data and actually upload it and then start asking questions. So if you, for example, have a 300-page PDF from the county, you can throw it into Notebook LM, it uploads it, and you can start asking questions. It's not so much like a chat GPT, it's more specific to that PDF. But the point of that is we start building those databases that we can go to, right? We can start pulling that county data and going in and asking those questions and make life a little easier. So I think that hopefully answers your question. You start talking about AI, I'll go down a rabbit hole, just saying. So, we used, we had a buyer for a house on an acre. The appraisal came in like 20 something thousand low. The listing agent really didn't want to be very helpful in bringing the value up, but we already knew the seller has already said, we're not accepting that, that low an offer. My buyer's like, hey, I really want this property. I said, okay. So we took the appraisal, took all the comparable data, put it into ChatGPT against the piece that we built. And it basically pointed out on there, here's all the issues with the appraisal. Here's where it references it in with the guidelines. We put all that together. We sent it to the lender and we got the value up 17,000. So, I mean, that's why I'm saying, I mean, human in the loop, it's great. AI works, but you have to be able to use it and understand how to use it. So, and that's one thing that we're trying to do is, you see us talk a lot about it is using it correctly. It's an extremely powerful tool. So, especially on the investor side, if used properly. I just think, I know I'm not trying to be mean here, but I think there's a lot of these land coaches that are out there now trying to push AI, and they really didn't build it. They had someone else build it and they're trying to push it, and they really don't understand the back end of it. So, I mean, that's my opinion, but.
Yep, that sounds about right. It's the new hot thing, and so people are trying to sell whatever they can around it. But sounds like you're using it pretty effectively.
We're trying. So, I mean, there's still things that we're missing, or things like, oh crap, I didn't think about that.
Sure.
Well,
So you're learning. We're all learning. All right, it's new. But Jason, one thing I really wanted to hit on is what your sales funnel looks like. Because, for example, in my business, and Mason can relate to this, I can't tell you how many parcels I've had listed on the MLS with a competent realtor, but ended up selling via a buyer on Facebook 3-6 months into the listing. So outside of the MLS, outside of your website, what other platforms are you using effectively to sell these properties?
Yeah. So, and that's the biggest, and Mason, you could probably talk to this as well, as this goes back to agent, and we're talking about more of the real estate side, the realtor side of it. They think that, I just don't MLS, I'm good to go. And I'm like, hell no. Cool. It's on MLS, right? There's a reason why we are signature. We pay to be on lands.com, right? We are signature providers. We pay that $2-3 grand a month because we know that's where the eyeballs are, right? Yeah, the MLS is great, but where do most people look? Not Zillow, because Zillow's not a land platform. It has land, right? But it's not a true land platform. So then we go to things like lands.com. We were using the MLS broker, which is a broker agnostic, broker ran land platform. But we weren't seeing the traction there. But I mean, to be frank with you, if you follow me on Facebook, Mason, see me, I post everywhere. So, we are using social media. We are pushing out to land groups, right? The, Central Texas land market, the for sale by owner land groups, the Texas land and ranch groups. We're pushing it out there. We do Facebook Marketplace. We do Facebook ads. We do Google ads. We're not just hoping and praying that the MLS is going to sell it for us.
Yeah.
And with us, and one thing I think, one way we are different, I think, than most realtors, is we tell our investors, say, look, if you find a buyer and we didn't help facilitate that, you don't owe me anything. Now, if you want us to help navigate the process, you don't want to have to deal with all the paperwork. Yeah, we'll figure that out. But if you come to me and say, Jason, I found a buyer for this 10 acres, I'm like, cool. You want me to handle it, or you gonna run with it? No, we'll run with it. You don't owe me anything. Yeah. That's just how we operate, because I didn't do my job. I'm just being honest, right? If you're out there trying to sell your own property and we didn't help you, then you don't owe us anything. That's just, but like I said, we're a little different than most. So,
sure. Well, that's a good lead to one of the other questions I had for you. One thing that many of us are looking for and struggling to find, especially in more rural areas where there's lots of demand for land. I'm finding this in the Southeast, where there's lots of land sales, but there aren't a lot of competent land-focused brokers. So how do land investors find brokers like yourself? And once they have identified one, what's important for them to make it worth your time to work with them?
As funny as it sounds, go to lands.com. I mean, seriously. Because those of us that actually specialize in land spend a lot of time on lands.com, and our listings are on there and our past sales are on there, right? So you can start seeing, okay, this guy actually does sell land. He's not selling 1 or 2 pieces a year. He's selling 50, 60, 70, 80 pieces, right? And outside of that, look at your land groups, right? Look inside Facebook, look in those, who's active, who's posting, who's relevant, right? Those are the probably the top two I'd look at. I know it sounds silly, but I'm being honest, right? And then from there, it's just as an investor, when you talk to an agent about land, do they even know how to spell investor? I mean, I know it sounds silly, but seriously, they don't understand the mindset of an investor. It's not at the end of the day, it comes down to the numbers. And if they don't understand the numbers, is that something, you're willing to work with? But the biggest question is, just like you asked me, Dan, is, where do you advertise at? Do you just put on MLS? Or I've had, I'm not trying to be mean, but I have agents, oh yeah, my listings go on lands.com. Okay, cool. How much do you pay per month? Oh, I do the free one. So you're on page 4. Yeah, seriously, you're pushed to the bottom and no one's, who goes to page 4 of a land, looking for land typically. Yeah, they're scrolling through the first maybe 1-2 pages like, yeah, we're good.
Yep.
But it also comes down to proof in the pudding, right? I tell them, ask them, let me see your numbers. What have you sold? How many have you sold? What sizes have you sold? What areas have you sold? So, and then I think the last question would be really, if you're in a smaller market, you may have one MLS. For me, I cover Texas. So we're in 3 separate MLSs, that cover Central Texas, Houston, and North Texas. And the reason we're in there is because we want to make certain that all the realtors are seeing what's available, but we're also strategically smart about it. So Houston, for example, syndicates to San Antonio. So I don't have to be a part of the San Antonio MLS because Houston will push to San Antonio. So if I have stuff that's going to be more of a San Antonio market, I could put in Houston and it still goes to San Antonio. Eventually, I can't remember if it's Houston or North Texas is working on a deal to populate to Austin's MLS, right? So it's just knowing and being strategic. But I don't mean to go down a rabbit hole on that. But yeah, Dan, that would be the easiest ones is, lands.com, Facebook group, see who's active, and then ask them just point blank, how many land deals have you sold in the last 12 months?
Sure. But I'm also flipping that question around from your perspective, what are the key, because I'm sure you get those people calling you that say they have listings coming up or they want your business, who you get kind of this person's wasting my time. And so what are the key things someone in our shoes and Mason or I's shoes should be saying and doing when we call you to make sure that, hey, we're not wasting your time and that you'll actually give us the time of day or agents like.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because there's a lot of wholesalers out there that I can't want to work with the realtor, right? And then these realtors spend months with them and then they've never done anything. First question I'd be asking if you came to me is like, okay, well, what's your past history? Is this something that's new to you or is this something that you've done on a regular basis? Okay, cool. Well, how much on a regular basis? 3 or 4 times a year, or we're talking 10, 15, 30, 40, 50 deals a year or more. We also start asking about your buy history, right? Are you buying off market? Are you buying on market? And then the biggest one for us is I always ask them, I say, do you own the property? Or are you going to own the property? Or are you trying to do this as an novation? I'm trying to do this as an novation. Well, okay. Well, that's a whole different conversation. That means you probably haven't done a ton of land. And that changes our conversation with them. But, those are some of the biggest things that we look for. But you can also, for me personally, if you were to call me and I start asking you questions, I can tell pretty quickly, relatively quickly, if you've done this for a while or this is something that's brand new to you, to be fair. But that comes down to, and Mason's shaking his head. Yeah. It comes down to experience level of the agent. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I see you engaging, in a lot of the similar land Facebook groups, where it's investor focused. And I think I commented on your post yesterday of people, it's the person that comes to you with that, Dallas infill lot, and they're like, hey, I've got this under contract for $240,000. I want you to list it for me for 300. And you're like, well, it's worth 96. So, I don't have time to do business with you.
Yeah. And that's where it comes down to, Dan, going back to your question is, one, as an investor doing their due diligence to the realtor, right? Figuring out who they want to call and dive into. But it's also the due diligence of an agent understanding how investors work, right? Understanding the difference between a wholesale and novation. Understanding, are you double closing or are you closing and then reselling after, right? There's a lot of nuances to that. And I think you can tell as the investor, when you're talking to the agent, you'll know right off the bat. Like when you start talking double close and they're like, what's that? Or they hear this like silence, awkward pause. They don't understand that, hey, you got it under contract. Let's find the buyer and close at the same time. And you're out no money and you make all the profit. They're like, what's that? So,
Oh yeah.
it goes back again. It's experience. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and speaking of experience, you mentioned earlier in the show of like trying to get 1,000+ acre listing, before the end of the year, and that's something Dan and I are both pretty focused on. Is very, very large properties. I think I'm negotiating on upwards of 60,000 acres throughout the state right now, and you see all the news of, all of these boomers are retiring. The kids don't want to take on the farm. There's several, 100 million or whatever it is acres that are going to be changing hands over the next 20 some odd years. For that seller, what are you seeing as an opportunity for brokers to be able to secure those listings and investors to be able to buy those listings, whether it's from the broker or directly from the seller? And the reason I bring that up is like, there's some groups where as soon as we say, hey, we're developers, they're like, no, we won't sell to you.
I think that comes down to them not understanding the word developer. They're just thinking what's in the news. They have Facebook coming in, building a giga center, right? And they're going to put wind farm, or they're going to put a nuclear reactor right in West Texas. They're thinking, oh my God, now you're going to take my, 600 acres and 1,000 acres and turn it into a new subdivision. I think it comes down to the vernacular, right? When you say I'm a developer, you explain to them, hey, we're not coming in here to divide it into, tiny homes. We just want to make it more accessible to more people. It may be 10 or 15, 20, 30 acre ranchettes that they can leave as a legacy to their family and their kids. So that's, but it's also, to your point, these are baby boomers. These are very old progeny. I'm a Gen X, so I'm getting there already. So, but mentality, but that's a tough one, because they don't want to give that up. But then you mentioned kids that want to take over the land. So you have parents that pass away. Now what? They don't care to a certain degree, as long as they make the money that they're looking for. So it's, it's a tough position to be in, because you have to be, as an investor, as in sales. This is a sales in general. You have to show some empathy, right? You have to have some understanding of where they're coming from, but hopefully you can relay your information to them to where what you're trying to develop with that, they can understand, if that makes sense. I think I kind of understand that question. Did I even answer it?
Yeah, no, I think you did.
I'm not thinking, did I answer that question?
No, you did. And it's so nuanced, right? Where, I was talking to a farmer out here trying to buy some of his acreage. He said he was open to selling, and then he, found, and I told him, this is what our plan would be with it. And he's like, you guys are the scum of the earth. And it's taking, 1,000 acres and splitting them up into 35s. And, I told him the saying of buy the ranch, sell it by the pasture. And he was like, anyone with an IQ over 70 knows that's the biggest bullshit that I've ever heard, this, then, and the other thing. And, there's some people that are like that. Yeah, that's awesome. You're going to make a ton of money doing this. This is how much I want. If you can't make that work, great. And if not, this. And so I think it's just an interesting demographic working with these large ranch holdings, where they see some of the numbers as stuff starts moving out there. And so there's a little bit of misalignment of expectations that we're still seeing, but also we're just trying to make the deals work.
Yeah, and I think that also comes down to, going back to, I think, what Dan was asking, we were talking earlier, what Dan was talking about was, or actually I think it was you, mate, talking about is a project worthwhile, right? When you go to talk to an agent, do they understand certain things? You may come to me and say, hey, Jason, I'm thinking about buying this 1,000 acres and I want to resell it as 1,000 acres. And I'm going to look at you and go, why? Buy the 1,000 acres and make it smaller. And they're like, well, why? I said, because you'll triple your money. They're like, why? I said, because there's not a big buyer pool for 1,000 acres, but there's a significantly huge buyer pool in this area right now for a 25 acre ranchette tract, or a 30 or a 50 or 60 acres. It's about, I call it more of a bite-sized chew, right? You have people that want this country life, this rural living, but they can't afford 1,000 acres, but they can afford 25 acres. But that's also when we talk to sellers, like they have a pie in the sky number in their head. And I'm like, look, if you want to sell your 1,000 acres for that number, it's not going to happen because that's what the market predicts. However, if you're open to this little idea I have here, we can not only make your number, we could probably make you more. And they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. Right. And it comes down to just presenting it the right way. But on to your side, Mason, it's just it's a unique dynamic because you've had land that has literally been in the family hundreds of years, and to them there is that emotional tie to the land, right? My grandfather lived there, my dad lived there, my kids lived there, and you're like, sure, yeah, okay, cool. Well, why are you wanting to sell it? Well,
and you want 25 cents on the dollar for it.
Yeah, But to that point, though, us, and we tell our investors this all the time. Look, if for some reason you have a piece of land that you guys cannot come eye to eye, but the seller wants to sell it, send it to us. We'll figure it out, right? We'll figure out a way to take care of our investors. At the same time, get the seller what they want, right? Because at the end of the day, it's marketing dollars. If you can recoup some of those marketing dollars to put back into something else that you can see eye to eye on the seller, we're all game to hear and help you do that, because at the end of the day, it means you're going finding more business for us to take and sell. So,
yep. Well, Jason, there's a million more topics that we'd love to hit on, but it's already just about been an hour. We don't want to keep you past, so we have a couple quick wrap-up questions here. So, if people want to find out more about you, what's your company name? Where can they find you? Who should they call? Go ahead, share.
I was always like, joke, call Ghostbusters. No, showing my age there. Realistically, if I always tell people, look, if you can't find me, you're not looking. We are everywhere. So North 40 Land Group is our main, for the land division. North Realty Group is more residential. You can put in Jason Northcutt Realtor and you're probably going to find me. We make it a point to be known and seen everywhere. We're all over Facebook. We're all over, my Google page is a little outdated because I can't get in there to update it because it won't let me, but good old Google. But seriously, I mean, that's the easiest way. It's just North 40 Land Group, or even North Realty Group. Either one of those will pop up or just my name and Realtor, Texas. Or to your point, Dan, the Texas Land Agent, that's our blog, right? You put in the Texas Land Agent, it should find us relatively quickly. So
Land Group, I like that. And the fact that you got the TexasLandAgent.com is pretty cool. Did you have to buy that from someone?
No. So I own like 130 domains. So I see something or I think of something, the first thing I think of is that available? Right.
Yeah.
And actually, Dan, speaking of that, is another way that with our investors, no, we haven't done it much because we haven't had any huge subdivisions, is a lot of times we'll create my Google pages. So when people drive by and they see this property, like if it's Apache Shores, right, and they type in Apache Shores commerce, they'll pull up a Google My Business page and to a website that they can go to right off the bat. So that's on the subdivision side of things, but yeah.
Good idea. So, yeah. Awesome. Well, Jason, we're going to wrap up. Maybe we'll have to have you back for round 2 in the future. We appreciate you coming on. But until next time, guys, this is Mason McDonald and Dan Haverkoff with Jason Northcutt for the Big Picture Blueprint, signing off.